My guest today is a pioneering voice in human experience management, and he's often called the godfather of customer experience. I like that. One of my favorite movies, The Godfather of Customer Experience, Part 2. He's shaped how leaders across the globe think about loyalty, about empathy, about purpose. He's a submarine systems engineer. He's the founder of the XM Institute and podcast host of Humanity at Scale, having guided Fortune 500 companies through complexity by keeping humanity at the center of their universe. Welcome to Leadership That Sells. This is the podcast for you if you want to understand everything there is to do about how you lead sales teams that are not really teams. They're what we call teams in parallel. They're working in a similar way, but they're not just working with each other, because that's not what they do. And most sales managers and leaders are still leading like they've got a football team. In reality, what they've got is like a group of golfers. And the mismatch between what they think they've got and how they manage what they've got creates all kinds of pain. Poor coaching, bad pipeline meetings, burned out managers and reps who just drift. And what we built is a lightweight reset to help your managers lead them in the right way, setting clear expectations, building identity without fluff, coaching people for autonomy without going hands off, not training. When you shift to a model that fits your team, performance scales a whole lot easier. Now, if that sounds like your world, grab the free Parallel Team Playbook at the Practical Leadership Academy website. It's short, sharp, and made for senior people with teams of managers just like you. Now, on with the show. Bruce Temkin, thank you very much indeed for joining me today.
Thanks for being here. And although I'm called the godfather of customer experience, don't worry, there won't be any horse heads in your bed.
That'll be good. And a very experiential horse head, you know. I saw you could be the head of an ex-customer or something. No, let's not go there. This is an entirely different conversation. You talk a lot about human behavior, about human-centric leadership. And in case you've not noticed, the people that you are trying to lead, ladies and gentlemen, they're all human and they're all messy and flawed individuals, just like us. What is human-centric leadership? How do we take account of human behavior? We think we are. We think we're doing it. We're not, because we're telling you you're not. How do we know? What do we do?
Yeah, so I think that whatever field you're in, if you're a sales leader, if you're an MBA operations leader or strategy leader, you've been taught a bunch of skills and capabilities, but most of them deal with the structure and the processes of doing your job. Very little of it is an understanding of how the people you're acting with, influencing, and trying to get on your side actually think, feel, and act. So human-centric leadership is really understanding the impact that you have on all the people around you and behaving in a way that actually drives the outcome you want without leaving a wake behind of, upset, crying, crazed people, right? I talk about it of really thinking about your future self. Future self is a behavioral science term, but it's really about, if you think in the future, what your legacy is going to be. Human-centric leadership is about creating a legacy where you succeed at your job and leave behind a better world.
With bells on. I mean, you talk about a wake, and there's two. There's the wake you go to when somebody's died, right? So there's the wake that you want to go to after your leadership has moved to a higher plane and you're burying the old you, right? But there's also the trail of destruction that I'm conscious of having left in my wake, of having gone through and just genuinely being horrible to people without knowing. You think that you are the great I am, and you're wandering it through, just, I'm me, big boss, you listen to me. And you just destroy people. You can really damage them if you're not paying attention.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to talk about. Obviously, that wasn't the wake, the first one,
No.
one of those wakes I was talking about. But the second wake is, I think, an important thing, right? Because when you're gone, or when people are about to go, they never say, I wish I had treated people in a more difficult way. I wish I was harder on the people around me. I wish I was like a real more of a son of a bitch than I was in the
Mhm.
past, right? That's never what people think at the end of their lives. So if somehow we can get the way people think at the end to be more influential on what they do right now, that's a form of humanity at scale too, right?
It's I was reading a wee thing the other day, and it's time travel. Now, bear with me, right? You know, when you travel back in time, as we all do, the last thing you want to do is meet your granddad because you might kill yourself because you step on an ant or something. You don't want to make a microscopic change in the past because it could make a vast change in the future, right? But nobody thinks about making just small changes today that would therefore accumulate and make huge changes in the actual future. So it's these small things you can do today that make all the difference in the world in 1, 2, 3, 5 years' time. Yeah. So when you're thinking about the human centricness of how you can lead, how you do things better, you talk a lot about trust, about empathy, and about purpose. How do these things impact performance and relationships? How does that
Yeah, so
fit
let's
in?
take them each one at a time. Let's do purpose, empathy, and trust. Let's go in that order.
Good.
So, purpose to me is the guidepost you use to focus on where you're heading, right? Without a strong purpose, you wander, right? And if you think about a leader who's wandering with a bunch of people following them, what does that look like? People spread all over the place. No one's going. It looks like a bunch of like little kids playing your football, our soccer,
Mm.
right? They're just all over the field. No, there's no pattern, there's no anything. That's what happens when a leader doesn't have a purpose. A purpose is clarity on where we're heading and why we're heading there that's shared amongst the people who we want to go with us, right? So that's the power of purpose. It aligns people and it keeps the energy and the direction of a group of people, not just yourself, going together. That's purpose. Empathy is, at the end of the day, we are succeeding or failing because of the behaviors and the attitudes of the people around us, right? So empathy is, it's not about being nice to people. Like let's first of all separate that. You don't have to be nice to everyone. What you do have to do with empathy is understand their needs as human beings and deal with that accordingly, right? There are some times where someone does something wrong and you're going to have to tell them you did that wrong. But empathy is all your actions should be done with the knowledge of the impact you are having on other people. So you talked about, right? Like if you yell at someone in public, and we were talking about that earlier before the show, right? If you yell at someone, and that might be the message you want to get across, but what does that do to that person, right? What does that do to that person's ability to help you succeed in the future, right? So that's empathy, really making sure that you understand the impact that you're having on all the people around you. And then trust. So trust is one of those things that I find is misunderstood. People think of trust as this abstract thing. To me, trust is pretty clear. And I like to use, and I tend to be on a little on the academic side, even though I'm not academic, but I'll defer to a really good academic definition of trust. It's the willingness, and it's by Mayer, Davis, and Shorman. They're like the foundational researchers on trust. And they define trust as the willingness of a party to be vulnerable to the actions of another based on the expectations that the other will perform a particular action important to the truster, irrespective of the ability to monitor or control that other party. In other words, what trust is about is how do you get people to take a leap of faith with you when they have no guarantee about what the outcome is going to be? And if you internalize that and you think about your life as a leader, you are asking for leaps of faith on every single day of
Every
every
day,
single week
every
of
day,
every single year.
every day, every day. I'm asking you to trust that my judgment is right. I'm asking you to trust that my decision making my discernment is is valid. In fact, is in some cases more valid than yours, because you would make a decision to do X, and I'm saying we need to do Y. You say, why? Trust me. You know, I've either got the experience, I've got the knowledge, I've got the accumulated reflection upon the experience based on the knowledge. I'm wiser. I have something that you don't, and there's something that I have is your trust. Because we can't get to that point unless you trust me to get us there. And
Yeah,
that's the thing.
and it's interesting because when I think about trust too, I think about the three components of building trust. And you talked about that relationship, right? As a leader, you have to trust that I have this knowledge, and trust this and that. To me, it's in order to build trust, the trustor, which is the person who is going along for the ride, the trustee is the person who's trying to get that trust. Um, and so the trustee needs to demonstrate ability, right? If you think about a leader, right? They have to, like, if I think you have no skills and you are terrible at your job, well, you fail the ability component. The second part is benevolence. I have to believe that you care enough about me that you will make decisions that align with what my needs are and what I would want. So that's benevolence. And if in the past you've treated me terrible and you've never sort of shown any accountability to my needs, you fail the benevolence test. And the third is integrity. You have to be consistent in your adherence to a set of principles, whatever those principles may are, so that I can expect that you would act in a way that I can expect that you'd act, right? So if you're like way over the board and you just behave in strange ways all the time, I can't trust you. So if you want to build trust, you have to demonstrate ability, benevolence, and integrity. And those are the foundations of, I think, building trust.
I would ask if there's an underpinning in this modern remote or hybrid world that we find ourselves in, as there's one foundational one, which I would say, one foundational thing, which I would say is possibly proximity. And you actually have to be there, because so many of the conversations we have are remote or text based versus us sharing a same physical space. And I think there's just something human about being in the same place. I find it possible to trust people that I don't um, haven't met, but have only spoken to on video. I think it
Yeah.
makes it a lot harder. I don't know if there's something there. It's just popped into my head.
Yeah,
Proximity.
no, I think it's interesting. So one of the areas I sort of talk and research and write on lots of different areas, but one of the areas I've looked at is and talked about is the notion of empathy 2.0, which is on the empathy side, which is consistent with sort of the benevolence and integrity side of the discussion we have been having here, that our natural empathy was built by proximity, right?
Hmm.
Cavemen
Yeah, yeah.
built
Round the
empathy
fire.
because they could look at, yeah, around the fire, collectively killing the buffalo, right? It was built on an immediate neurological response to other people's feelings, right? That's why if you see someone like hurt, step into a wall and grab their arm because it's hurt, you are going to naturally, yeah, the response that
Yeah.
you just had, which is to cringe simultaneously, is a neurological system that's built into us. Now, that system breaks down when we're not looking each other in the same room, right? And so empathy, while it still exists, becomes much harder in a distributed remote environment. And so my argument around that is because some of the natural strength of being together is lost, leaders have to be more implicit and explicit in how they build that empathy and think about questions like you raise, which is how do we establish and grow trust in an environment that isn't naturally suited to be able to do it very well?
Yeah, yeah. And I think if you're not, I mean, I've read quite a bit about this. I mean, I've been working with remote teams for, well, I don't know, nearly 2 decades with WebEx, things like that, the tools. And then the teams are all over the world and they're different time zones, different currencies, different whatever it is. And trying to pull people together, you realize is quite challenging when you eventually get your leadership team in one room and they know each other and they work together, but they're still dancing around the handbags is the expression, because they've never actually spent a lot of time physically together. So in the British context, you take them all out the pub and you get them all a bit pissed. You just have some good time together. You could become human. But that lack of proximity, I think, causes so many problems. And you don't want to trust someone that you don't actually care about. So you have to bring them together. You have to have that time. I don't know.
Well, it's interesting because I try and stay away from the notion of you have to do anything.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
because I think once you go down that path, people go, well, we can't bring people together, so then we give up on the entirety of the
Mm,
argument that you have, right? So I agree. It's better, and there is a strong case for bringing people together and building trust, but don't give up if you can't. I
mm,
think that, you just have to think about the medium itself, right? If you're very transactional in your interaction in person, people can still pick up on signals, right? You can put a hand on their shoulder, you can shake them, you can look them in the eyes, you could be a little transactional, but they can still feel comforted and cared about, right? So you have to say, okay, you and I are remote here, right?
yeah.
So what are the things we can do in this setting to showcase empathy and build trust? I can ask about how you're feeling, what really is important to you, right? I can pause before jumping in with answers, right? I can behave in ways that are explicitly trying to build that empathy as a foundation of trust, right? But it's whereas leaders have traditionally sort of built on their natural in-person charisma,
Yeah.
they have to think about what is your digital charisma, what is your remote sort of disparate approach to that charisma, and you have to think about it differently, right? It's not there's no big handshakes and smiles and patting on the back when we're sort of
Mm.
remote. So you have to think about what's your equivalent show of empathy to other people in settings like this.
I think there are some pretty good takeaways that we've come up with. I mean, the one guy that I liked reading is a leadership writer that I had in the podcast a few years ago called Joe Owen, and he wrote a piece bang in the middle of COVID, which was, how do you work remotely? What's the best way of doing this stuff remotely? And he said, get people together. So this is it. You need to get people together. You can continue the relationship remotely, but if you can, get them together, because that's where you build. That's where you grow. You grow closer together. And then when you're apart, you can then stretch that. You can rely on that. And it's like any situation. If you know you're going to be going through a tough time with your team, you build it up. You build it up so you've got credits in the bank. So when you're going to stress them and ask them to work late and do all sorts of weird and wonderful stuff, you've got the credit in the bank. The bucket has been filled. There are the stuff that you can do, and I like this. There's two things in particular. One is, so, and you're making a noise here. You're just a sharp noise, right? You just, and it just kind of like pulls things together. The other is, your reason you shake hands, of course, is to show my hands are empty there and I don't have a weapon. So some people don't like doing it, but you wave. Hi, how you doing? On a video. How are you? My hands are empty. I don't have a spear here. I'm not trying to hunt your buffalo, you know? Just one second, please. 1 second. I'm just going to turn to a blank page in my book. You see my book? turning to a blank page here so I can give you my undivided attention. So, and you're making a show of it. There's the things you're doing to make a show that you are important to me. I have given you my undivided attention. I'm calling this conversation to order. There's that sort of stuff that you can underpin technique with. But then you have to have the desire to build the trust. Then you need to go for the credibility. Then you need to go for the empathy. Then you need to try and build that trust up. I think that's...
Yeah, no, I like those. I would also put in, if you think about the parts of the interaction that you'd have, that if you're in person, right? If we're in person, I probably can sense that you have disconnect with my words, or you're not completely bought in, which gets lost in a visual interaction like this. So think about that. So if I'm not getting the right signal because of we're not in proximity about whether you're on board or understand that, then take the time to ask, okay, does that make sense? What feels unresolved? Ask, one of the recommendations I have is called invite the unspoken, right?
Yes.
Whereas you get the signals of the unspoken if you're together, but you have to get more explicit about it if we're in a different medium.
If somebody's in the corner of the room and they're just like, what, really? But they're not saying anything. How do you pull that out? Now, in a one-to-one, it's okay. I mean, heaven help us when we have 9 people in a Teams call. You get no chance. The videos are microscopic. They just don't have that ability. I mean, I don't know what the magic number is. I would suggest it's like 6 people in a call before you start to lose all sense of empathy, all sense of humanity.
Let me say, I wish people could do it with 6 people in a Zoom. I think you lose sight of it once there is like more than 2. And because one of the other things we have is that on a Zoom call, right? One of the things you can do to improve your Zoom calls too is take yourself off of video. There's a lot of, because what you don't understand is this off. Take your video for you, just your self view. You should view for them.
Right. I get you. Yeah.
What happens is when we are very attuned to our own self-preservation, right? So I won't go into it, but the brain has 2 parts of its brain, right? The subconscious and the conscious, right? And the conscious does a lot of the logical processing and is the stuff that keeps us on board and is sort of like our great aunt who's keeping us doing the right thing in general. Now, if we have our pictures on, we tend to spend a lot of our cognitive conscious ability trying to look at ourselves and make sure we're doing something else. And if we're doing that, whatever part of our brain, our conscious and subconscious brain at this point, is focused on how we look, that's diverting the attention away from the other people that you want to have there. So I would, one of the things I would do is get yourself, start off so you're in a good picture, but then take it off. Take yourself off. People don't know whether on your view you're on or not, but take your picture off your own view so you're not wasting the cognitive cycles keeping track of your look.
That's phenomenal advice. And I've got right on my screen here just now in this Zoom call, I have our 2 pictures up because that's what we're recording and that's how it works. But I've also got floating over my head so I can see you, my nose. So I can't see me. So I'm just focused on you. I didn't realize I didn't realize I was doing that, but that is immensely valuable because I do find myself checking out, do I have the hairline? Am I wearing a tie or whatever it is? That's really, really valuable.
Well, yeah, and if you think about it in person, we don't have any of that, right? Like the way human interactions were set, they were never like, think about it, I go and I shake your hand in person. I'm not like, there's not a picture of me beside your face that I'm also trying to look at simultaneously as shaking your hand and trying to look you in the eyes.
It's almost like a vanity thing, isn't it? I suppose if you had If you had a mirror and you're behind you, I'd be looking at me just to make sure. I suppose so. That's fascinating. You have a great podcast. You have a great podcast, Humanity at Scale. What would you say is the top couple of things that you've learned from your guests? Because I always take away things from the conversations I have.
Yeah, no, I've had amazing guests. I often say that my podcast is for me, and if other people enjoy it, that's
Totally.
great.
That's
That's
it.
great.
I'm utterly selfish about it. I don't get any ideas, but I totally think I should pay for my guests. You know, because it's
Yeah,
like a free masterclass on humanity at scale, on X, Y, and Z. It's brilliant. People just turn up and talk to me.
Exactly.
It's so cool.
It's wonderful. So I've been spending a lot of time on things like morality on one hand. So if you think about the world, there's I've looked at a lot of why there's conflict and look at things conflict from the Middle East to the boardroom, right? And one of the great things, guest Kurt Gray. I have a lot of professors and researchers and big thinkers. That so one thing I from that episode that really stuck with me is the fact that we are all more alike than we think, and that most of what people do is trying to avoid risk and pain. So when we're fighting, it's not that we have a different moral background, it's that we see different risks. So if you take the left and the right, in general around the world, right? The right people, the people all the way on the right see immigrants as a risk. The people all the way on the left see the loss of democratic norms and social benefits as a risk. So it's not that we're morally inconsistent, it's that we see different risks and we're all trying to minimize those risks on behalf of us and our families. So that was one big thing I try to get across, right? We're all more alike than we aren't. The other one I'll point to is I had a great episode with a guy, Faisal Hawk, who's, AI is a big theme on my podcast, as it should be, right? Because how can we talk about the future of humanity without acknowledging and including AI as parts of the model we have to think about? So Faisal Hawk, who's one of the world's leading thinkers on AI, was talking about, and this was an area I hadn't really given a lot of thought of. If we just think about what AI does, in a lot of cases, it eliminates entry-level jobs. In lots of industries, it's doing the very basic jobs. And the best models of sort of AI doing those entry-level, assistant-level things, and experts in the field working alongside it in partnership, right? So the best chess players in the world are an AI with a chess master, right? Working together, unbeatable, right? When they use the combination. But the one thing I hadn't thought about that he raised my awareness to, right? Which is that that's great, but if we don't have people in those entry level jobs, then over time, because people become experts through mentorship,
Yeah.
through trial and error, through learning, we're eliminating all of those learning paths to becoming the experts. So we're actually creating a future of a lack of expertise across multiple fields where AI is helping to bring in and take over some of the entry level jobs. So those are some of the really interesting discussions, and I could go on and on.
Fantastic. Well, I would just have to recommend that everybody goes off and subscribes to the Humanity at Scale podcast with Bruce Temkin. There'll be a link in the notes to this
Thanks.
episode to that as well. So you've been building trust, understanding behavior, leading human-centric change. Now, I think this is particularly relevant to sales leaders, sales managers who are looking to lead teams, deepen customer loyalty, adapt to highly complex, fast-moving environments and things like that. Do you have a particular insight that you think might help somebody in one of those roles move from being transactional to being more relationship driven?
Yeah. So my big advice, and it's sort of like my core advice to becoming more human-centric is to pause and reflect.
Mm.
That I think that pausing and the notion of metacognition. So my last guest on my podcast talked a lot about metacognition, which is thinking about thinking.
Yeah.
Um, right? That the only way we can ever get meaningfully better at something is taking the time to think about what we're doing and deciding whether we want to do something differently, right? And so if you're about to have an interaction that doesn't feel well, pause. If you want to get something done, if you want something from someone, pause and think about what the best way is given all the stuff you have. There's a area of psychology called cognitive behavioral disorders, CBD. And what it teaches you is and this is the way they teach people who have mental problems like anxiety to deal with the world, which is to stop when you're about to do something, name the feeling that you have, and have some behavioral actions you take based on that. The same thing holds for leaders, right? Identify where you fall down. Is it that you sort of in the heat of the moment overreact to a person that works for you when they've done something wrong? If that's the case, look for when that's about to happen, name it, say think about it, I'm overreacting, pause, and do something different. So that's one pause. The other pause is, take time every day and every week. That's what I recommend. Every day, at the end of every day, I don't care, spend 5 minutes or 10 minutes. That's all you have to do. And reflect on how did you interact with the people around you? And was it the way? And did you get out of those interactions what you wanted and what they wanted? Do that reflection once a day for a small amount of time and once a week and look back on the week. And that notion of reflecting is a powerful redirection of your actions and behaviors.
There's the idea that most people just drift through life. They drift
Yep.
without purpose, they drift without reflection, they drift bouncing from situation to situation, good or bad, indifferent, in a grey porridge of mundanity. And I think the superpower that you name there of reflection, of using our God-given ability to think, actually intentionally using it, the metacognitive step of where am I? Who am I? What am I to these people around me? What am I trying to achieve in this moment, in this weekday life that I've lived? And that alone puts you at the top 0.1% of most of humanity.
And it's interesting, right? Because your audience probably doesn't care about the word or wasn't thinking about here about metacognition, but the ability for human beings to be metacognitive is one of the things that absolutely separates us from every other entity, including AI.
Yes.
And so it's something that is uniquely human, and we should lean on a lot more.
Yeah. Real is all that's left.
Mm.
Thought is all that's left. Wonderful. You
Meaning
strip everything.
is all that's left.
I think then, on that, Bruce Temkin, I have to say, with meaning being all that's left, humanity at scale, thank you very much indeed for joining me.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.